option for SAP S/4HANA. Upgrades and updates. It means in today's session, we will hear more on what happened in this topic and which upgrades and updates are available now. Our expert speaker for today is Jens Figger from SAP, and he will introduce his role in his presentation. My name is Larissa Brinkmann from SAP Global User Groups organization, and I'm your host for today. We kindly ask you to place your questions in the live chat, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. With this, I wish you great interaction. Please be active and state your questions in the live chat, and I ask Jens to take over.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Larissa. So very warm welcome from my side. This is Jens speaking, and before I start with the real session, let me briefly introduce myself. I worked with SAP for 12 years meanwhile. I'm the former product manager for Zero Downtime option. So why the former product manager? I just changed my role actually internally within SAP. So we are currently in the transition phase to a new product manager. So we have a successor already on board. However, we decided that I do that presentation now, and we slightly move over to the new colleague. So having said that, I would directly jump into the news on Zero Downtime option, also known as ZDO for SAP S/4HANA updates and upgrades. But of course, beforehand, let me just give you here another glimpse on what's coming next. As you may know, that's a webcast series from various topics that we deliver from the Software Update Manager side. So my partner in crime, Boris Rubart, hosted a good handful of sessions already in the meantime about system conversion and the introduction to SUM, etc. There will be one more session hosted by Boris tomorrow, DTV, the Data Transition Validation. And I will close our webcast series next week with the Technical Downtime Optimization application. Also here, then in the role of the former product manager. Exactly. And then later, of course, my new colleague will jump in maybe next year for new sessions. So having said that, we can directly start with today's topic, dealing about ZDO and about updates, upgrades for SAP S/4HANA. As usual, let me give you a brief introduction to the topic as such. So you may know that slide also from Boris' sessions. It's just to emphasize what do we have in our portfolio with regards to maintaining existing ABAP-based systems like SAP ERP and of course also SAP S/4HANA systems. So you can see we have quite some downtime optimization approaches dependent on the scenario that you want to achieve. So there might be a scenario like database migration. So for customers that want to stick to ERP, but they want to change from NADB to SAP HANA, we have a DMO procedure, and along with that, a downtime optimized DMO. Yeah, so that means you can selectively optimize the downtime by moving parts from downtime into the uptime. That's as usual. Yeah, so we want to reduce downtime, and that goes along with we carve out things. And in the DMO case, it's the uptime migration of tables that will be carved out into the uptime handling. Now you can see downtime optimized DMO is also applicable to a system conversion to SAP S/4HANA if the source system is not yet on SAP HANA. Yeah, so there is 3 flavors of optimizing a conversion coming from NADB going to SAP S/4HANA. The first 2 ones come along with the SUM tool, and Boris has introduced that in the past webcast that he did here as part of the Global User Group session. And the third one, NZDT, that's a service-based approach. Yeah, don't mix that up with NZDM. I will come back to that in a minute. NZDT, near zero downtime technology. It's a service that has to be delivered by an SAP expert, and it can't be done without any expertise from SAP side. NZDT applies to the conversion path only. However, if you have reached S/4HANA already, we are talking about updates and upgrades. So updates is the smaller portion, support packs and feature packs. And upgrades means we go from one version to a next higher, or maybe to a second next higher version of SAP S/4HANA. Yeah, for this, we have basically three approaches. Two are downtime optimized, and we will focus today on the ZDO approach. I will briefly touch base on NZDM, the near zero downtime maintenance for ABAP, coming also along with the SUM tool. But as I said, focus will be on the zero downtime option. Yeah, to summarize that briefly, we have also an overview in the SAP Support Launchpad. This link will be posted also in the chat soon. And of course, the slides, you will get them also as download after the session is available in YouTube. So as I said, we have here quite a number of approaches delivered by the SUM team, plus on top the NZDT. As I said, that's a service-based approach. And talking about the zero downtime option, you can see there's two entries available. The one for Business Suite, that's there for, I think, 6 years meanwhile, and that remains as of today also in the status of a pilot project only, pilot mode only. It's defined here in the 2163060 SAP node. Last year with SAP TechEd 2021, we also announced the general availability for ZDO for S/4HANA, and that's what will be covered in the next couple of slides. Yeah? So how can you get ZDO for SAP S/4HANA? What does it mean? It's available to an educated expert. That will be also clarified now. And all the information on what is my minimum start release to do an upgrade using ZDO. How can I get the training, etc. Everything can be found in this SAP node. Yeah, 2707731. That's an important one to get started with the topic. So now, of course, don't jump out of the call and read the note. You can do that later. Let's take a look to the different approaches. I said, basically, we have three approaches, right? So doing an update or an upgrade of SAP S/4HANA. So it's obvious, yeah, the SUM comes along with a standard and a default approach, which has particular phases already moved from downtime to uptime by using and leveraging the shadow system operations. So, we're going to build up a shadow system. We import parts of the main import as part of shadow import, and so on and so forth. So that comes with the default and with the standard approach in any update and upgrade case. The next level would be an NZDM approach, where we basically decided to carve out even more table imports into the shadow system operations. So that depends on what tables are touched by importing content and customizing. How big are those tables, etc. So a couple of things has to be considered, and then we're gonna select these tables as part of our SUM procedure. Plus, what is also optimized using NZDM is more or less the technical table conversion. So the SUM phase behind is called PARConf UPG. So for the tables that need to be converted because of a change, so like you have key field and another key field is added. Yeah, that's a very classic one why a table has to be converted. These changes are also in particular possible to be moved to uptime handling. And that's what we have under the umbrella NZDM. Yeah, so it's more or less a checkbox. You set that, and then the magic is done under the hood, right? So it's kind of really straightforward. And I can also tell you, you know, our ECS organization within SAP, so the Enterprise Cloud Services, formerly known as HEC, for customers running their systems within ECS, even use NZDM as the default for upgrades and updates. For the customers that have a higher demand on reducing the downtime, we have zero downtime option. Of course, also ECS customers can opt in for ZDO. That's just a side remark. ZDO is then, as the name already tells you, right? So we have the ultimate goal and the aim to move everything that run in the past in downtime now in uptime. Yeah, that goes along with, of course, the significant reduction of technical downtime, but also from a project aspect and standpoint, we see that we have an increase in terms of the effort that you have to put in. Yeah, just some keywords here: the number of test cycles, maybe. Yeah, but also the tests as such that you have to do along with the upgrade and throughout the project, etc. So here we see a clearly higher effort. The more you want to optimize the downtime, the more effort you have to put in. So from a solution approach perspective, as said, we have the motivation to have no technical downtime. Yeah, first of all, let me also clarify this terminology on technical downtime. In the past, or by using the standard and the NZDM approach at a certain point in time, and using here the laser pointer, we would hit at the end of the shadow system operations a point where the administrator gets a dialogue, hey, now the system has to enter the technical downtime. Yeah, and then for a couple of hours, the system is just not reachable for nobody. This is our approach. We want to get rid of that, and that's what we have achieved, right? So what we can do with ZDO, instead of running the former downtime steps, or instead of running the downtime steps at all, we build up a kind of an isolation on a database level where we have a separate kind of an area that represents the source release, release 1, while in the background, the target release is finalized. Yeah, so all the activities that formerly run in downtime, and that includes the remaining table import, XPRAS, the remaining table conversion, etc., that would then run in parallel. There's one key aspect that we always have to consider. We need to make sure that a business user that runs still on the source release must not see anything that belongs to the target release. This is achieved by carefully selecting the tables that are really changed by the upgrade, and eventually running then these tables in 2 different versions. I will come back to that a little more in detail later. Yeah, so this construct that we built up is actually more or less happening on a database level, where we have 2 different schemas. One represents the source release, and the second schema represents the target release. However, it's very important that you understand we don't clone the entire database. That's also selectively done. Yeah, and as said, I will come back to that also in a minute. The end users are eventually transferred to this new database schema that we create without any interruption. So the kernel as such and the display work processes are equipped with a feature of a so-called smooth reconnect. Yeah, so we, of course, have a dialogue where we decide when do we want to introduce the end users to the bridge subsystem. So that's what you can see here. That has to be somehow also aligned. However, for the end user, there shouldn't be any change at all, right? So the end user is not needed to log off and log on. It's just like if you click on the save button in the UI, the work process in the next dialog would then run in the new environment. Yeah, so there's no separate dialog instance, etc. built up. It's just that the technical work process is reconnected to a different database schema. That's the magic behind what you see here between release 1 and this bluish part and going to the bridge subsystem. Eventually, at the end of the maintenance event, we always have a cutover window where the activation of the target release, release 2, comes, and that goes along with a restart. So I try to introduce this here by this slash. Yeah, that's the cutover from the old release going to the new release. We have some activities that has to be considered as part of ramping down the old release in the system and ramping up the new release. So that's very famous, right? You have to clear out the queues, etc., and things like that. And to have that proper cut between source and target release and not to mix up the releases, the restart of the application service is done. Now, also here, a side remark, the restart is done in parallel without database, so it's rather fast. So in average, we end up with a switch from old to the new release with like 5 to 15 minutes. That's what we have observed in the past. So just to compare that also a little, as said, we have the 3 different approaches, right? We have standard NZDM and ZDO. You can see with NZDM, the technical downtime already shrink. Just to recap here again, so NZDM focuses on moving parts of the table import and parts of the table conversion into the uptime. So as said here, it's uptime on original instance, right? And in parallel, we have the shadow system operations. And eventually, if you consider then ZDO, you would not have any technical downtime at all. Yeah, we just have that uptime on the bridge subsystem. That essentially means the end users continue their work to the very end of the upgrade. And only when you have your planned cutover window from the source to the target release, you activate this new release by performing a restart. Of course, the restart is also orchestrated by the SUM tool. There's no manual intervention with any scripts needed. It's everything orchestrated along with our tool, with the upgrade tool. Important to consider is ramping down, ramping up the system still holds true for any approach. Yeah? So that's very important. We have to make sure, log out the users, stop the batch jobs, etc. When I talk to customers in the past, I always also try to emphasize you and then my customers to also take a look to the left and to the right, which means left, the ramp down. How long do I need to do a clear ramp down of my system and also ramping up, right? I've seen customers, they spend, I don't know, just too much time, like hours for ramping down, ramping up the system. And also there, it's not the SUM tool that would improve the ramp down, ramp up speed, but sometimes you just have maybe processes that are done manually that can be automated with scripts, etc. Also here, just a heads up, yeah. If you want to optimize your overall business downtime, this ramping down and ramping up activities should be considered as well. Moving further to, as I said, zero downtime. And as promised, I will also talk here a little more on the details. However, for the technical deep dive, there is a training available that I will also introduce in a minute. So very basic here, the kind of the circle of how to get started and what are some key pillars of a zero downtime upgrade and zero downtime project. And that's under the umbrella so-called ZDO readiness. Yeah. So how can you ensure that you are good to start and run a zero downtime project at all? And that starts in SAP S/4HANA with taking a look about how does the database look like? Well, of course, there's several versions that we support. That's documented in the main SAP node. But also very important to consider, and that's just a technical aspect, but it's an important one, that SAP HANA has the possibility to create native HANA content. So in other words, in the very early days when that was introduced, this native HANA content, like any calculation views and attribute views and however they're named, they were created in the HANA repository 1.0, yeah, technically known as SysBIC, SYSBIC. And here we have one big limitation from the SysBIC as such. Yeah, as I introduced here in the one-pager, our key aspect is that we need to separate the source and the target release, and that's basically achieved by just cloning the objects that are changed by the upgrade. So I decided to take the object term, right? So it's tables and also the objects that are stored natively in the HANA database. Yeah, for tables, it's rather simple. We say if a table ABC gets a change, like there's, I don't know, a character to integer change or whatever, our table classification, that's step number 3 here. The SUM tool has an algorithm that detects this kind of changes, and then this table classification would just calculate, okay, I need to clone the table ABC. Now coming back to the content migration for SAP HANA, the objects that you have stored in the SysBIC schema can't be cloned in that simple way. We would have to clone the entire database schema SysBIC, which is not possible. So we have worked with the HANA team on a different technology. We got that some years ago. I think it was introduced in 1709 the very first time. So long story short, all the content that is stored in SysBIC, and if that still holds true in your system, needs to be migrated into HANA deployment infrastructure containers. Yeah, short, it's HDI containers. There we have the full supportability of zero-downtime upgrades. So we can clone the entire HDI container into a new container, and that fulfills our requirement. If you would not do that content migration, this would lead to a restriction during the bridge runtime. So eventually, after rolling over all business users and end users from the original system, from here to the bridge subsystem, the SysBIC container is not readable at all. Yeah, that's this limitation. And for this, as said, we say if your business processes rely on this content that is stored in the SAP HANA database, you have to do the migration. And I want to give you here also a recommendation. I would decouple this migration from the ZDO project as such. That can be done well in advance. So if you consider zero downtime maybe only next year for an upgrade, but you definitely consider that, maybe already today, think about, do we have any SysBIC objects in the system? If yes, then how can I do the migration? Yeah, that's development effort that you have to put in, testing effort that you have to put in, etc. It's a one-time thing, but it's a very important one. Else, if you miss this point, and later on, if you are in a ZDO project and you are doing the testing with your end users in maybe a queue system or any other test system, and they report this kind of issue, that can become a showstopper in the project. So I talked a lot about this content migration. I think now it's clear it's a very important one, a step that you of course have to consider. Step number 2 and 3, let me just briefly summarize it here. SAP has to ensure that the overall stack of SAP S/4HANA is compliant with our zero downtime development guidelines. We ensure that internally with ATC checks or ABAP test cockpit and so on and so forth. Yeah. So if any developer is doing any change in our S4 core product, also in connected applications, we do run ATC checks to see if our compliance is met. And enablement means if any application-defined procedure like an XPRA, an IM, etc., is developed, this also has to follow certain guidelines to meet the requirements of a zero downtime upgrade project. Yeah. Only by having a fully compliant stack and software that is provided to SCM tool, we can calculate which tables are really changed by the upgrade. That's very important. As said, we have this proper isolation between source and target release. This is achieved by going through every single table in the system. You know, we have more than 100,000 tables in an S/4HANA system. And we have to compare what's the source, what's the target from a structure perspective, and will the target get any table content like customizing. And based on this information, the SUM tool decides, I keep the version, I need a new version, or yeah, that's basically what we do, right? Or the third option would be, I have a second version, but the source version can become or would become then only readable for the bridge runtime. So having said that, it's also an important one. And you know, in the beginning, I illustrated the more you want to optimize the downtime, the more effort you have to put in. The effort in terms of testing shouldn't be underestimated for a zero downtime project. Typically, you test only the target release. In a zero downtime project, we highly recommend to also test the source release when you are in the bridge subsystem. Yeah, so in any non-prod system, that is a testing activity that we highly recommend, along with running a tool that is called impact analysis to see, are there any restrictions, limitations during the zero downtime upgrade project? Yeah, so what would be such a limitation? So on the one hand side, the main SAP node has some nodes listed from applications where they clearly define when you run in zero downtime upgrade, then the following business processes might be blocked or are blocked. Yeah, that applies, for instance, for the CAR system, the customer availability reporting, and things like that. The second restriction or limitation that can come into the game is the table classification calculates that a table that is structurally changed would become read-only for the time on the bridge subsystem. And exactly this should be figured out in a very early stage of the project. Yeah, typically, our assumption is should be only customizing table and none of the big application tables are impacted at all. But that has to be proven sometime or at that point in time. And with that tool impact analysis, we can exactly prove that based on the usage of the system versus the table classification result, we don't see a problem. Or in the worst case, you would identify that in the early stage of the project. So that's also important. Number 5, and now going to again further here in the circle, site and data migration typically comes only after the upgrade project. But before you start an upgrade project, especially here, we talk about starting maybe with 2020 release, make sure that site and data migration is finished. Site and data migration, I could easily talk another hour about that topic, right? Just very briefly, it has been introduced in 1909 only. It's kind of a successor or a technology that exists in parallel to XPRAs, so programs where we kind of transform data. Yeah, so a classic one would be AC.A gets a new field, and this field should be filled with data. If you would do that with an XPRA program, AC.A would become read-only. Yeah, then we have reached the end of the game. Yeah, so we can't do that. Hence, we came up with the technology to transform the data in a different way. So having the site and data migration in place, we can for sure append the AC.A with the field, but the real content in the field is only generated once the upgrade is finished. Yeah, and that also means we have a prerequisite. If you start the upgrade project from 2020, maybe in the near future when 2022 comes out, make sure that before you start the upgrade, the site and data migration classes that related to 1909 and 2020 are fully executed. Otherwise, you would have to do that during the SUM execution, because SUM also has that check in place. Yeah, so that is this kind of a circle that are the quite some relevant steps where you have interactions in number 1, 4, and 5. Yeah, number 2 and 3 come along with the SUM tool or with the software stack as such. Yeah, so SAP ensures software is compliant, and number 3, table classification is done in the SUM tool. And then you have to continue here during the ZDO upgrade with the impact analysis. Further details can be found in the training. That's important, and I will touch base on that now in that particular slide. So when that leads me now to the availability of ZDO for S/4HANA. So I said we have introduced zero downtime for SAP S/4HANA last year as a general availability in that state, general availability. So updates and upgrades with respect to which add-ons can run on my SAP S/4HANA system and are supported for ZDO. We have, I think it's kind of a handful of add-ons that are currently not supported. Yeah, they are attached to the main SAP node. As I said, that's really a good starting point to get familiar with what are the prerequisites and restrictions for ZDO. Last, there is one training, and along with an assessment that was launched last year in the SAP Learning Hub. I will have also the course description in a later slide. That's important. Along with the GA status, we also launched that training because it's a mandatory training and it's a mandatory assessment. But before I come to that process, how you get it, let me also take a look and tell you for which software can you get it, right? So as said, we started with 2020. So if your system runs on 1909 and you want to do an upgrade to 2021 or 2022 once it's out, that's not a valid path for zero downtime option. Yeah. There was, and there's still, and if you check the attachment of 2707731, there is the possibility to do a pilot project from 1909 to 2020. But there is no way to do 1909 or any older release to 2021, for instance. Yeah, the so-called possibility to jump over certain releases was only introduced from 2020. Yeah, I have one more slide on that to make that a little more clear. GA status started with 2020. That's the important key message that I want to take here. Also, what's important to know, system conversion, that what the topic what Boris represents typically, has different approaches for downtime optimization. There is no zero downtime system conversion. No, there is no way for doing that. Yeah. So I said 2020 or maybe 2021, any support and feature pack can be upgraded to any support or feature pack of a next higher version. So for instance, 2021. As said, SAP plans very soon to release the successor of 2021, might be called in 2022. That would also then enhance the path in a way that this or higher holds true. So you can then do an upgrade from 2020 to 2022. Yeah. As said, I have here that slide that illustrates here what is possible. And I take again the example of the start release 2020. I can do 2021, 2020 X if it's 2, 2022. And now it's getting maybe a little tricky. I built that slide couple of weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago, SAP announced a change in the release strategy for SAP S/4HANA. With the year 2023, we will ship a 2023 release. That's what I understood. We will skip the major release in the year after, which means from 2023 onwards, a big major release of SAP S/4HANA comes every 2 years. Yeah, so then in 2025, a new version comes out. So we will, and that's what we plan now, and you can see here lab preview, that we will have the opportunity and possibility to do an upgrade from 2020, also to the 2023 release. What I can't answer right now is how would that look like if I start now in 2021, and can I go then to 2023 only, or also to the successor of 2023 that comes in 2025? This question I can't answer. That has to be defined and rolled out then in the future. But as said, right now with the current paths that are available in products, we have the possibility to jump over 2 big releases. So this example, 2020 to 2023. But I said this 2021 with the arrow going to the release that comes after 2023. That's something that I can't answer if this holds true or not. Yeah, to be answered once it's clarified internally. Yeah, the key message here. In the past, we were not able to do jump upgrades at all with zero downtime option. Since last year, with the 2020 as start release, we can offer jump upgrades and we can do it. Essentially here, that means once 2022 is out, an upgrade from 2020 to 2022 can be done. Yeah. GA. Yeah, last year we announced that GA status along with that training. Yeah, I have mentioned that now a couple of times. There is a mandatory e-learning. By the way, the links are also available in the main SAP node. So the direct links to the trainings in Learning Hub, as well as the knowledge badge assessment, ADM 330, E and K, both links, there are some tiny URLs, they are added to the main SAP node. Yeah, so if you want to do that training along with the assessment now to get prepared, yeah, then feel free to do so. As said, that's mandatory because if you want to kick off a zero downtime project and you start the SUM tool, you will be asked for a password, and this password will be sent by the SAP support. Yeah, I have described that process in the main SAP node. Yeah, where else should it be described? So there you find the way how you get the password. And it's very important. If you open up the incident asking for the password, you always have to also attach the URL to the Gradley badge of the knowledge badge assessment. Otherwise, the support colleague can't send over the password to you. Yeah, and then you're good to go. Yeah, so I said here we start with learning, we do the assessment, and then we are good to go for the upgrade. We get the password from the support, and then you can eventually launch the software update manager. And if your system meets the prerequisites, like it's running on 2020, it does not have any of the permitted add-ons, etc., then your scenario strategy tree looks like this, that zero downtime is there, zero downtime option. And if you select that, the next dialog will ask you for the password. And also here we have described what information you have to deliver. So just raise the incident on the component BCU, PG, DTM, TLA. You deliver the SUM version along with the system ID and the Gradley badge. Yeah, the password is a combination of the system ID and the SUM version. So if you go for a higher version, like last year, when was it? I think it was yesterday, we released the SP15 of SUM 2.0. There you have a different password compared to SP14. That's important also to know. And if you have a project in the future, you may also consider asking for more than one password. If you want to speed up the processing, you can also ask to get the passwords for the entire landscape. Yeah, having said that, let me just summarize what I have talked about in the last 35 minutes, the key takeaways. Zero-downtime option is available as part of the SUM tool. So we don't have any separate license, any additional costs. There is a free training available if you have a valid subscription in the SAP Learning Hub. So if your subscription is there, then you don't have to pay on top for the ADM 330E and K, and you get that with your subscription. With SAP S/4HANA 2020, we set ZDO to the general availability status, and it's essential here to check the 2707731 SAP node for the prerequisites and restrictions. Yeah, what are the advantages? I mean, it's obvious, right? We significantly reduce the overall business downtime by going down to a single restart of the application servers. And I said, I want to point out again, we do not clone the entire system. Yeah, as you have learned now, and if you do the training, you will learn that in very detail. The SUM tool has an intelligent algorithm that carefully selects only the tables that are really changed and modified by the upgrade. And based on that, we decide which tables need to be cloned and exist in two different versions. That keeps our database footprint for the additional tables that are there during the upgrade procedure is running quite small, I would say. If you ask me now for the number, if your system has like 0.5 terabyte, the answer from me would be, I can't tell you the size estimation, because that's something that is very individual based on which tables are then really cloned, depends on what is your source and the target release. And the SUM tool will tell you the truth. You have to really also go through a first POC, a proof of concept, to elaborate on the one hand side, what's the additional space that I need in the database, etc. What are the limitations that the impact analysis prints out, and so on and so forth. Yeah, with that, I want to give you here also by hand some further information. As said yesterday, we launched the SUM 2.0 SP15. And I mean, meanwhile, you already remember this number, right? The main SAP node, and some further links that are probably useful, like the support portal page for zero downtime option, and some further blogs and sessions, recordings from TechEd, etc., that you probably want to go through. Yeah, having said that, handing over to you, Larissa, and let's see what are the questions that we got in our chat.
Thank you, Jens, for your presentation, for these details and also considerations on what to do when. And we have the first question in the chat. What is the difference between reaching downtime and actual start of the downtime is several weeks due to unfortunate reasons? Will the free space take a hit?
Just try to think if I got that correct, that question. The difference between reaching the downtime and the actual. Will ZDO, I mean, I think it was enhanced now, right? Will ZDO ever be extended to partners? I think that's the second question, so I park the second one. Just reread the first one. So in zero downtime, we don't have that downtime, right? So we have the bridge runtime, and if you move over the end users to the bridge subsystem, they typically stay there for like 2 or 3 or 4 days, depends on how you calculate that in the cutover plan. If you say the planned downtime or the cutover, which was planned for Saturday, should happen maybe a week after, the end users will stay and still work and operate on the bridge subsystem. During that time, the overall construct that we built up with the SUM tool is still there. No freeing up of the space, because only if you would do a reset of the overall upgrade procedure using SUM, the space is freed up. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question. Otherwise, you may rephrase or tell me what's missing in the chat. So essentially, the database space is only freed up either if you finish the upgrade with SUM or if you reset the upgrade also using SUM. So the second question, I just read that here, Larissa, is will ZDO ever be extended to partners? So to be honest, I mean, you can use that also even as a partner, right? If you say you have consultants that are educated that went through the ADM 330E and ADM 330K, you can also do the upgrade on behalf of your customer. Yeah, for us, it's important that someone that is educated is part of the project. It might be someone from customer side or from partner side. Yeah, that doesn't matter actually who it is. So the answer here is yeah, you can use it even as a partner. Any other question, Larissa, that
yes, we
came
have
up?
the next question in the chat. What is the bridge? Bridge meaning the word bridge. Is it a dedicated SAP application server where users will still be seeing the previous release?
Okay, yeah, that's a very important and a valid question. So the bridge subsystem, it's a terminology that was introduced with zero downtime option only. And here I clearly want to highlight, we don't build up any new app server, we don't build up any instance. Yeah, so if you take a look to your existing architecture, you may have a primary application server and 2 additional application servers. And you have a database. Yeah, what we do is within your database, we have then 2 schemas. One represents the bridge subsystem, it's called the shadow schema, and one represents the original database schema that is there forever. Yeah, and both schemas are then representing a different version. Yeah, the bridge subsystem, they see the tables that belong to the source release, and the second schema sees only the target release. And now the end users, they still operate on the same application servers. The only thing what we do is when rolling over the end users to the bridge subsystem, the database connection behind the work process gets changed from the one schema to the bridge sub-schema. So that's essentially what we do here. So the only change that happens is more or less on the database level. No new app servers, no new login credentials. So your SAP GUI and the sub GUI or the Launchpad URL, everything still is valid, right? Everything more or less happens under the hood.
Okay, we have the next question. Any plans for ZDO for this scenario in pipeline or future? One-step conversion from ECC to S4.
Yeah, so for the transition to SAP S/4HANA, the path from ECC and SAP ERP is called system conversion. Yeah, for the system conversion, and I may jump back to one of these slides here. Just open that up. For the system conversion, we have the downtime optimized conversion. So there's no plan to have a zero downtime conversion. Yeah, so we stick to the ZDO that is there for updates and upgrades, and for the system conversion, we have these 3 flavors for downtime optimization. I hope that answers your question.
I hope so too. I can't see more questions in the chat. Please indicate if the answers were understandable. And if not, please provide some clarification. So let's see whether we'll have more questions in the chat. In the meanwhile, I can also share the information that the PDF of this session will be included to the description to this video that will be available immediately after we end this session. So you can anytime download the information with all the links and yes, and use it on demand in your projects. Yes, we have a confirmation that the author of the question is satisfied with the answers. However, we have one more question. Does bridge system has separate database schema?
Yeah, so the bridge schema, the bridge subsystem sees one schema, and the second database schema is used by the upgrade tool, yeah, or by the upgrade subsystem. Yeah, so we have two different database schemas, but the bridge sees only the schema representing the source release. So I can recommend, and I want to invite you here to take a look to the ADM 330E training. There I have explained that also with some graphics to make it easier to understand. So I'm afraid, but for that format, it would be just too deep in the topic, and I could easily talk then 2 or 3 hours. But as said, I would recommend here to take a look to the ADM 330E, where you also can see some illustrations on how the database schemas look like in the SAP HANA database. Yeah, then I hope it's getting then more clear.
All right. So more questions in the chat. Now is your last chance, as we are almost at the end of the time that we dedicated for this session. And I can only share the information that tomorrow we will have the next session of Boris. Unfortunately, we had to postpone it from the last week. So tomorrow, yes, stay tuned at the same time. So we will then continue our Cloud Lifecycle Management webcast series. So I can't see more questions in the chat. Thank you, Jens, for your presentation. Thank you for all the consideration that you have shared with our audience. Thank you to all the participants of this session, to the audience, to those who provided questions in the chat. We will be very much delighted to welcome you in one of our upcoming sessions. As I've already said, tomorrow we will hear from Boris again.
Yeah, thank you, Larissa, for having me and for hosting me. And thanks everybody for tuning in, being interested in the zero downtime topic.
Yes, and Jens is not the last time with us. He will also provide one more session next week. I think it's on 20th of October. So also don't miss this one. And as I've already said, we will be very much delighted to have you in these upcoming sessions. With this, thank you very much and bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.